You know that person who acts like the group's unofficial manager? The one who reminds everyone about deadlines, carries ibuprofen like it's a personality, and somehow feels responsible when a stranger drops a bag of groceries? Yeah, there's a decent chance they were the oldest child. Not always, but the stereotype exists for a reason. And before we roast them for being controlling, let's be real. If you grew up as the first human your parents ever managed, you basically lived inside a startup. No policies, no training, just vibes. And you were the beta version. So what does that do to someone long term? It tends to create a person who's weirdly competent, secretly tired, and emotionally allergic to chaos. Here's the first big thing. Oldest children often become their parents' practice run, which sounds cute until you realize practice runs come with more pressure and fewer instructions. When you're the first, your parents are more anxious, more attentive, and more likely to treat normal kid behavior like it's a diagnostic event. You cough and they're like, is this a rare illness or a personality trait? That extra attention can push an oldest child into performing, being a good kid. Because being good gets you stability. Psychologists talk about reinforcement like it's a lab rat thing, but it's really just do what makes the household calmer. Oldest kids learn fast, what makes adults relax. And once you learn that, it's hard to unlearn. That's where the classic oldest child identity starts. The responsible one, the helper, the mini adult, the kid who gets praised for being mature, which is both a compliment and a trap. Because mature in kid language often means I don't cause problems. And that can turn into a lifelong habit of self-editing. You're not necessarily calm, you're just skilled at not showing the chaos. Now, birth order psychology is messy. It's not destiny. Family size, culture, parenting style, and money stress matter a lot. But as a pattern, oldest kids are more likely to experience something called parentification, which is a fancy word for you were given responsibilities that were a little too adult. Sometimes it's obvious, like watching siblings, translating for parents, being the house referee. Sometimes it's emotional. You're the one who listens to a parent vent, the one who keeps the peace, the one who senses the temperature of the room before anyone speaks. And if you had younger siblings, you didn't just grow up. You grew up with an audience. You became a model, which means your mistakes felt more expensive. Because it wasn't just you being wrong, it was you setting the wrong example. And that pressure creates a particular style of perfectionism. Not the glamorous, I love excellence kind. The nervous system kind. The kind where you clean the kitchen before you can relax because your brain thinks relaxation is something you earn, not something you're allowed to have. And here's what nobody talks about. Oldest children often develop a strong relationship with control, but not because they love power. Usually it's because control feels like safety. When you were the first kid, you lived through your parents learning how to parent. Rules changed mid-season. One week, bedtime is strict. The next week, it's a negotiation like the United Nations. Oldest kids learn to anticipate, plan, and manage variables because unpredictability is stressful. So later as adults, they might look organized, but what you're really seeing is a coping skill. They're not obsessed with planning, they're preventing disaster. Even if the disaster is just someone being disappointed. That's another oldest child theme, sensitivity to disappointment. When you're the oldest, you often get more expectations. Not always spoken. Sometimes it's just the vibe. You're supposed to be the example, the achiever, the one who doesn't make life harder. So you start measuring yourself by outcomes, grades, performance, being reliable. And if you internalize that, you don't just want to succeed, you want to avoid letting people down, which creates a weird social superpower. People trust you quickly, bosses love you, teachers love you, friends love you, because you're dependable. The cost is you can end up with a personality that's basically, I will carry this so nobody has to worry. And yes, that makes you impressive. It also makes you exhausted. Now let's talk about how this shows up in relationships, because this is where it gets weird. Oldest children often default into roles: organizer, protector, problem solver. So in a partnership, they might unconsciously become the parent of the relationship. Not in a creepy way. In a did you pay the bill, did you eat, I made a plan way. If you're dating an oldest child, you might feel taken care of. And also quietly supervised. And if you are the oldest child, you might not even notice you're doing it. It just feels like love. But the deeper layer is this. Caring can become fused with managing. They don't just want you to be happy. They want to prevent the conditions that could make you unhappy, which sounds sweet until it turns into micromanaging someone's life because anxiety is wearing a helpful costume. On the flip side, oldest children can be intensely loyal. When you spent your early life being responsible for something bigger than yourself, you're not casual about commitment. You show up, you remember things, you keep promises. You're not built for flakiness. But that can also make it harder to leave bad situations because your brain says, if I just try harder, I can fix it. That's a common oldest child blind spot, overestimating how much control you have over other people. Because as a kid, your job was basically to influence the household with good behavior. So you learn this belief, if I do everything right, everything will be okay. Adult life eventually informs you that this is optimistic. Another big piece is sibling dynamics. When the second child arrives, the oldest goes through their first major identity shakeup. Before that, you're the main character. Then suddenly you're sharing attention with a tiny screaming competitor who contributes nothing but noise and receives unlimited resources. And the oldest child has to adapt. Some respond by trying to be extra good to keep love and approval. Some respond by becoming independent, like, fine, I don't need anyone. Some become little co-parents. And if parents lean on the oldest, even subtly, the oldest learns, my needs come second. That's where you can get adults who are amazing at supporting everyone else and mysteriously terrible at asking for help. Because asking for help feels like burdening people, and burdening people feels unsafe. Here's the contrast. Younger siblings often get more freedom, more relaxed parenting, and more room to be messy. That's not always better. It can create different insecurities, but oldest kids often carry a unique weight. They're the benchmark, so they may be more achievement-oriented, more conscientious, sometimes more anxious. Personality researchers call that conscientiousness, the trait linked to being organized and responsible. It's associated with success in school and work, which is why oldest children sometimes look like they've got it together. But conscientiousness has a shadow side, rigidity, guilt, and feeling like you're never doing enough. Like you're always one forgotten task away from being irresponsible, which is basically their worst insult. And then there's the emotional style. Oldest children often become the calm one in a crisis because they had practice being the steady one. They can tolerate pressure, they can make decisions. Their stress response is often do something, fix something. But when nothing can be fixed, when the situation just sucks, they can feel helpless in a way that's almost insulting to their identity because their identity is built around competence. So they might avoid vulnerability, not because they don't have feelings, but because feelings without action feel like failure. That's why some oldest kids come off as emotionally distant. It's not that they don't care. They care so much that they'd rather be useful than messy. And usefulness is safer than needing. Of course, not every oldest child becomes the household CEO. Some rebel hard. Some become comedians. Some become artists. But even then, you'll often see the same underlying themes: sensitivity to expectations, awareness of other people, and a strong internal rulebook. Even the wild oldest child often knows exactly what rules they're breaking. They're not confused. They're making a statement. And culture matters. In some families, being the oldest comes with formal authority and duty. In others, it's just an unspoken vibe. In high-stress households, oldest kids may become hyper-responsible because someone has to. In more stable households, they may simply get more structure and attention, which can boost confidence. Same role, different outcome. That's why oldest child isn't a personality, it's a position. And positions shape you based on what the system needed from you. So what is this shape in the future? Career-wise, oldest children often gravitate toward leadership, planning, teaching, management, or any role where being reliable is rewarded. They're good at authority because they've been negotiating authority since they were 4. Socially, they're often the friend who organizes the trip, checks in when you disappear, and somehow has everyone's birthday in their calendar. But internally, they may struggle with delegating, relaxing, and receiving care without feeling guilty. Their default is, if I'm not contributing, I'm failing. The growth move for a lot of oldest kids is learning that you can be loved without being useful, that you can make mistakes without collapsing your identity, that you don't have to earn rest by overfunctioning. And if you're not the oldest child and you know one, here's the main takeaway. When they're being bossy or too serious, sometimes you're not seeing ego. You're seeing a nervous system that learned early, if I keep things together, everyone is safer. So the next time you meet that friend who shows up early, brings extra chargers, and looks mildly stressed when nobody has a plan, don't just label them controlling. They might just be the oldest child doing what they were trained to do, keeping the ship afloat even when nobody asked them to captain it.